The radio crackled with static, then silence. In the pre-dawn darkness over the Hindu Kush Mountains, 6 Navy SEALs pressed themselves against jagged rocks, their night vision goggles revealing nothing but empty sky where their extraction bird should have been. Team leader Marcus "Razor" Kane pressed his comm unit again. "Guardian Base, this is Raptor 6. Where's our ride?" Static, then a voice tense with barely controlled panic. "Raptor 6, abort extraction. Taliban reinforcements converging on your position. Estimate 200 hostiles, heavy weapons. Air support is 20 minutes out." 20 minutes. Kane looked at his men. Rodriguez clutching his wounded arm, Peterson's ammunition running low, all of them bone-tired from 36 hours behind enemy lines. 20 minutes might as well have been 20 hours. That's when they heard it, the distant whop-whop-whop of rotor blades, but wrong somehow. Too early, too alone. "Guardian Base, we have an unidentified bird inbound. Please advise." A long pause. Then, "Negative, Raptor 6. No friendly aircraft in your vicinity. Repeat, no authorized extraction at this time." The helicopter grew louder, and through his night vision, Kane could make out the unmistakable silhouette of a US-60 Black Hawk, flying low and fast through the mountain passes. But something was off. The aircraft bore no running lights, no identification strobes. It moved with surgical precision through terrain that had claimed dozens of aircraft, threading between peaks like it was dancing with the mountains themselves. "This is Ghost Runner," came a voice over the radio, calm, measured, with a slight southern drawl that cut through the static like warm honey. "I've got eyes on 6 friendlies in need of immediate extraction, coming in hot." Kane's blood ran cold. Ghost Runner wasn't on any roster, he knew. "Guardian Base, authenticate Ghost Runner. We need verification now." But Guardian Base had gone silent. The Black Hawk appeared overhead like a phantom, its rotor wash kicking up clouds of dust and debris. Kane could see the pilot through the cockpit glass, a figure in full flight gear, face obscured by helmet and visor, hands moving across the controls with an almost supernatural confidence. "Raptor 6, this is Ghost Runner. I'm coming down whether you like it or not. Taliban's got your 6 and they're closing fast. You've got 30 seconds to make a choice. Trust me or become a statistic." The Taliban muzzle flashes were already visible on the ridgeline, tracer rounds beginning to arc across the valley. Kane looked at his team, then at the mysterious Black Hawk hovering impossibly steady in the thin mountain air. 30 seconds to choose between certain death and complete trust in a ghost. The first RPG streaked past the Black Hawk's tail rotor, exploding against the cliff face in a shower of orange flame and shattered stone. Ghost Runner didn't even flinch, holding position with the kind of steady hand that spoke of thousands of hours in hostile airspace. The aircraft's door gunner, if there was one, remained invisible, but Kane could sense eyes watching, calculating, protecting. "Raptor 6, you're burning daylight," Ghost Runner's voice came again, still maddeningly calm despite the incoming fire. "I've got a hot LZ, and about 60 seconds before this place becomes a shooting gallery. Are you coming or not?" Rodriguez, clutching his wounded shoulder, stumbled toward the helicopter without waiting for orders. "I don't care who she is," he shouted over the rotor noise. "I'm getting on that bird." Kane caught that detail even amid the chaos. Their mysterious savior was female, flying a combat mission that officially didn't exist, in airspace that should have been crawling with enemy air defenses. Peterson and Williams followed Rodriguez, leaving Kane with Johnson and Murphy to provide covering fire as more Taliban fighters poured over the ridgeline. The Black Hawk's engine screamed as Ghost Runner adjusted power, the aircraft bucking slightly in the mountain turbulence but never losing its precise hover. "Guardian Base, this is Raptor 6. We are boarding unidentified aircraft for emergency extraction. Repeat, we are." "Raptor 6, do not board that aircraft. Repeat, do not board. That bird is not authorized for this operation." Kane looked at Murphy, whose young face was streaked with dirt and exhaustion. The kid had maybe 3 magazines left, and the Taliban were now less than 200 meters away. Guardian Base, with all due respect, that bird is the only thing standing between us and a very bad day. Negative, Raptor 6. Stand down and wait for authorized support. Ghost Runner's voice cut through the radio chatter like a blade. Gentlemen, I don't mean to rush you, but we've got company inbound. Military-age males with attitude, approximately 150 meters and closing. If you're coming, come now. Kane made the decision that would haunt Pentagon briefing rooms for months to come. Load up, now, now, now. The 3 remaining SEALs sprinted toward the Black Hawk as tracer fire lit up the dawn sky. Kane dove through the cabin door last, feeling the aircraft lift off before his boots cleared the threshold. Through the open door, he watched the mountainside erupt in muzzle flashes as the Taliban reached their former position. Ghost Runner banked hard left, using the terrain to mask their escape route. Kane caught a glimpse of the pilot's hands on the controls, small, steady, adorned with a simple silver band on the ring finger, definitely female, and flying like she'd been born in the cockpit. The Black Hawk screamed through mountain passes at speeds that defied both physics and sanity. Ghost Runner threaded the aircraft between peaks with margins measured in feet, not yards. Kane had flown with some of the best pilots in the military, but this was something else entirely, an almost supernatural fusion of pilot and machine. Raptor 6, this is Guardian Base. Respond immediately. Kane keyed his radio, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold beyond the cockpit. Guardian Base, Raptor 6. We are safely aboard extraction aircraft heading home. Copy that, Raptor 6. What's your pilot's name and call sign for our after-action report? Kane looked toward the cockpit, where Ghost Runner sat silhouetted against the dawn sky. He could see the pilot's profile now, strong jawline, dark hair tucked beneath the flight helmet. She caught him looking in her peripheral vision and gave the slightest nod of acknowledgement. Guardian Base, our pilot's call sign is Ghost Runner. As for her name, Kane paused, realizing he had no idea who had just saved their lives. Stand by for further information. But Ghost Runner was already reaching for her own radio. Guardian Base, this is Ghost Runner, delivering precious cargo to Bagram. ETA 15 minutes. And for the record, her voice carried a weight that spoke of battles fought and prices paid. The name is Major Evangeline Evie Cross. Tell whoever's asking that the Reaper sends her regards. The radio went silent. Kane felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd heard that name before, whispered in pilot-ready rooms and special operations briefings. The Reaper, a legend that most people assumed was just that, a legend. Rodriguez, still clutching his wounded arm, leaned over to Kane. Boss, who the hell is the Reaper? Before Kane could answer, Peterson spoke up from across the cabin, his voice barely audible over the engine noise. She's the pilot they say doesn't exist. Flew black ops missions that never happened in places we were never supposed to be. He paused, watching the mountains scroll past the open door. They also say she died in a crash 2 years ago in Syria. Classified mission, no survivors. Kane looked back toward the cockpit, where Major Evangeline Cross continued to thread her Black Hawk through impossible terrain with the casual grace of someone who'd long ago made peace with death. If she was supposed to be dead, it raised uncomfortable questions about their current situation. But as Rodriguez had pointed out, whoever she was, they were alive because of her. And in Kane's experience, that was the only credential that mattered. The Black Hawk descended toward Bagram Air Base as the sun climbed higher over the Afghan mountains. Ghost Runner, Major Cross, handled the landing approach with the same supernatural precision she'd shown throughout their escape. The aircraft touched down on the tarmac with barely a bump, rotors still spinning as ground crews rushed to meet them. Kane helped his wounded teammate toward the waiting medical personnel, but not before turning back toward the cockpit. Major Cross was shutting down systems with practiced efficiency, her movements economical and precise. She hadn't removed her helmet yet, but Kane could see her eyes in the reflection of her visor, dark, intelligent, carrying the weight of someone who'd seen too much. "Major," Kane called over the dying whine of the turbines. She turned, pulling off her helmet to reveal a face that was younger than he'd expected, but aged by experiences he couldn't imagine. Dark hair fell to her shoulders, framing features that were striking rather than beautiful, a distinction that spoke of character forged in fire rather than genetics blessed by fortune. "Your team's safe," she said simply, her southern drawl more pronounced now. "That's what matters." "Who are you really?" Cross smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm someone who couldn't live with the alternative." She gathered her flight gear and headed for the aircraft's exit. "Tell your people at Guardian Base that Ghost Runner is officially back on duty, and if they have a problem with that, they can take it up with the dead girl walking." She disappeared into the crowd of ground personnel before Kane could respond, leaving him with more questions than answers, and the growing realization that their rescue had been anything but routine. Later, as Kane sat in the debriefing room facing a table full of colonels and intelligence officers, he would struggle to explain exactly what had happened in those mountains. How a pilot who was officially dead had materialized from nowhere to save their lives. How she'd flown that Black Hawk like it was an extension of her own body. How her voice had carried both the warmth of a Georgia evening and the cold finality of a gravestone. "Major Cross has been listed as KIA for 18 months, Colonel Harrison said, tapping a classified file. Her Black Hawk was shot down over Aleppo during a mission that, officially, never took place." Kane studied the file photo, the same dark eyes, the same determined jawline, but softer somehow. This was Evangeline Cross before whatever had happened to transform her into the Ghost Runner. "Then who pulled us out of that mountain?" Kane asked. The room fell silent. Finally, Harrison closed the file and leaned back in his chair. "That, Sergeant Kane, is exactly what we intend to find out." But Major Evangeline Cross had already vanished back into the shadows of the classified world, leaving behind only the memory of rotor blades in the dawn, and the knowledge that sometimes angels wore flight suits and went by call signs that sent chills down the spines of career military officers. The legend of the Reaper was about to become very real again. 3 days after the mountain rescue, Evangeline Cross sat in a maintenance hangar at a base that didn't officially exist, watching her crew chief inspect the Black Hawk that had carried her back from the dead. Staff Sergeant Miguel Santos had been with her for 7 years, through 3 deployments and 1 supposed funeral. He was one of only 4 people who knew she was still alive. "Bird took some hits in the tail section," Santos reported, running his hands along the aircraft's skin like a doctor examining a patient. "Nothing critical, but we should replace these panels before your next unauthorized rescue mission." Evie smiled despite herself. Santos had a gift for making the impossible sound routine. "Any word from Washington about our little adventure?" "Oh, plenty of words, most of them not suitable for mixed company." Santos grabbed a wrench from his toolbox. "Colonel Harrison's been asking questions, the kind that usually end with people getting new assignments in places where polar bears outnumber humans." Through the hangar's open doors, Evie could see F-16s taking off for patrol missions over the Afghan countryside. Normal missions, with official orders and proper authorization. The kind of missions she used to fly before her world went sideways in the skis over Syria. "Tell me something, Santos. What do you think happens to pilots who are supposed to be dead but keep showing up to save people?" Santos paused in his work, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. "I think they get to decide whether they want to stay dead or come back to life, but either way, they don't get to just keep floating around in between." It was the most philosophical thing she'd ever heard him say, and probably the most accurate assessment of her situation. For 18 months, She'd existed in a gray zone between life and death, between official existence and classified denial. The rescue of Raptor 6 had thrust her back into the light, whether she was ready or not. Her satellite phone buzzed with an encrypted message. Report to Guardian Base tomorrow 800. Dress blues, full decorations, time to come home. H. Harrison, the man who'd pronounced her dead, was now summoning her back to life. Evie walked to the hangar window and stared out at the mountains where she'd found Kane and his team. Somewhere out there, Taliban fighters were probably still wondering what kind of ghost had snatched their prize from certain death. Soon, Pentagon officials would be wondering the same thing. Santos, prep the bird for one more flight. I have a feeling Ghost Runner's about to become officially retired. Yes, ma'am, where to? She touched the silver wings pinned to her flight suit, the same wings she'd earned 10 years ago as a young lieutenant with dreams of serving her country and maybe, if she was lucky, making a difference. Tomorrow, she'd probably have to explain how those wings had carried her through 18 months of missions that never happened, in service of a war that officially didn't exist. Home, she said simply, we're going home. But as she watched the sun set behind the mountains, Evangeline Cross couldn't shake the feeling that home might no longer have a place for a pilot who'd learned to navigate by the light of burning bridges. The briefing room at Guardian Base felt smaller than Evie remembered, though perhaps that was because it now contained 3 generals, 2 colonels, and enough classified documents to stock a small library. She sat at attention in her dress blues, ribbons and medals arranged in perfect regulation order across her chest, a rainbow of service that told the story of a career cut short by official death. General Patricia Hawkins, commander of Joint Special Operations, studied Evie with the kind of intensity usually reserved for battlefield assessments. Major Cross, according to our records, you died 18 months ago when your aircraft was shot down during a classified mission over Syria. Your body was never recovered, and you were posthumously awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. She paused. Yet 3 days ago, you materialized from nowhere to extract a SEAL team from hostile territory. I'm curious to know how a dead woman learned to fly. Evie had rehearsed this moment during her flight from the forward base, but sitting in this sterile room surrounded by career officers, her prepared words felt inadequate. Ma'am, reports of my death were greatly exaggerated. This isn't a joke, Major. No, ma'am, it isn't. Evie's voice hardened. I've spent the last 18 months flying missions for people who don't exist, saving lives that don't officially matter, in places we're not supposed to be. While you were writing my obituary, I was learning what it really means to serve. Colonel Harrison leaned forward. Those were unauthorized operations, Major, conducted without oversight or approval from this command. Those were necessary operations, sir, conducted because someone had to do them. General Hawkins raised a hand to silence the brewing argument. Major Cross, help me understand your situation. If you survived the crash in Syria, why didn't you report in? Why let us believe you were dead? The question Evie had dreaded. The one that required her to explain 18 months of choices that had seemed clear in the field, but looked questionable under fluorescent lights and official scrutiny. Because, ma'am, being dead gave me the freedom to do what needed to be done without worrying about political consequences or risk assessments or congressional oversight committees. She met the general's stare. Dead pilots don't have careers to protect. They just have missions to fly. And who, exactly, was giving you these missions? Silence settled over the room like morning fog. This was the question that could end careers, topple governments, and reshape the entire landscape of American military operations in the Middle East. Evie had protected those secrets for 18 months, but sitting here now, she realized the truth was both simpler and more complex than anyone in this room would want to hear. I was, ma'am, I was giving myself missions. The statement hung in the air like smoke from a crashed aircraft. Major Cross, General Hawkins said carefully, Are you telling us that for the past 18 months, you've been conducting solo military operations without authorization from any command structure? I'm telling you that for the past 18 months, I've been saving American lives that would have been lost while we debated authorization protocols and filled out risk assessment forms. Evie's voice carried the weight of every mission, every close call, every face she'd pulled from certain death, including 6 Navy SEALs 3 days ago. Colonel Harrison shuffled through the files before him. Major, do you have any idea how many international laws you've violated? How many diplomatic incidents you might have caused? Do you have any idea how many mothers still have sons coming home because of those violations, sir? The room fell silent again. Finally, General Hawkins spoke. Major Cross, you're presenting us with an impossible situation. We can't officially acknowledge missions that never happened, conducted by a pilot who was officially dead. But we also can't ignore the fact that you've apparently been conducting effective military operations in some of the most dangerous territory on Earth. Then don't acknowledge them, ma'am. Put me back in my grave and pretend Ghost Runner never existed. But don't try to tell me that what I did was wrong. It was General Richards, the Pentagon's representative, who finally broke the impasse. Major, there's a third option we'd like to discuss. Evie waited. How would you feel about doing officially what you've been doing unofficially? A new unit, small team, high-value targets, missions that require the kind of creative approach you've demonstrated. She should have been relieved. Instead, she felt something that might have been disappointment. After 18 months of flying free from bureaucracy and politics, the idea of returning to official channels felt like trading wings for chains. With respect, sir, I've seen what official approval does to good intentions. This would be different. They always say that. General Hawkins stood, signaling the end of the formal briefing. Major Cross, you have 24 hours to decide whether you want to remain dead or accept resurrection under our terms. Either way, Ghost Runner's unauthorized operations end now. As the officers filed out, leaving Evie alone with her thoughts and her choices, she realized that some prices of resurrection were higher than the cost of staying dead. That evening, Evie found herself walking the perimeter of Guardian Base, her dress blues traded for flight suit and tactical boots. The familiar weight of her sidearm and the smell of jet fuel in the desert air reminded her of simpler times, when right and wrong were separated by clearly defined battle lines and enemy identification was a matter of uniform colors rather than political allegiances. Santos found her near the flight line, where a row of Black Hawks sat like sleeping metallic birds in the gathering darkness. "Heard you got offered the keys to the kingdom," he said, lighting a cigarette despite base regulations. "More like the keys to a very expensive cage. Could be worse, could be unemployed." Evie smiled. Santos had a talent for reducing complex situations to their most basic elements. "What would you do, Miguel?" "Me? I'd ask myself one question. Do I trust them to let me keep doing what needs to be done, or do I trust myself to keep doing it regardless of what they want?" It was, she realized, the same question she'd been asking herself for 18 months. The answer had led her through some of the most dangerous airspace on Earth, kept her alive through missions that existed only in classified whispers, and ultimately brought her to this moment of choosing between official resurrection and continued ghostly existence. "The SEALs I pulled out yesterday," she said, "Kane and his team, they're alive because I didn't wait for authorization. And they'll stay alive because you did what needed doing, authorization or not." Santos dropped his cigarette and ground it under his boot. "Major, with all due respect, you've been dead for 18 months and the world didn't end. Maybe it's time to trust that it won't end if you stay that way a little longer." As he walked away, leaving her alone with the desert stars and the weight of an impossible decision, Evie realized that Santos had just given her the answer she'd been looking for. Some people were meant to exist in the margins, operating in the spaces between official policy and practical necessity. For 18 months, she'd learned to navigate those spaces with a precision that had kept her alive and brought others home. The question wasn't whether she could return to official service. It was whether official service could accommodate someone who'd learned to fly by different rules. Her satellite phone buzzed with another encrypted message, this one from an address that didn't officially exist. Extraction needed. High-value package. Time-sensitive. Location follows. Ghost Runner requested specifically. Evie stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without reading the mission details. Tomorrow, she would give General Hawkins her answer. Tonight, she had one more unauthorized mission to fly. Some debts could only be paid by those who officially didn't exist to collect them. The mission brief was everything Evie had come to expect from her shadow handlers: minimal details, maximum risk, and the kind of political sensitivity that made official acknowledgement impossible. A CIA asset trapped behind enemy lines in Yemen. Hostile forces converging. Extraction window measured in minutes rather than hours. The kind of mission that would never appear in after-action reports and would be disavowed by 3 different government agencies if it went wrong. Evie pre-flighted her Black Hawk in the pre-dawn darkness, running through checks with the mechanical precision of someone who'd learned that small details could mean the difference between mission success and becoming another classified casualty. Santos worked beside her in comfortable silence, both of them understanding that this might be Ghost Runner's final flight. Package is a female CIA operative, call sign Mockingbird, Santos reported, reading from an encrypted tablet. She's been feeding intelligence on terrorist funding networks for 6 months. Cover's blown, and she's got maybe 12 hours before they parade her in front of cameras as an American spy. Evie nodded, settling into the pilot's seat and beginning her engine start sequence. The Black Hawk's turbine spun up with a familiar whine that never failed to send adrenaline coursing through her system. This was what she'd been born to do, not the politics or the bureaucracy or the impossible choices between official sanction and moral imperative, but this moment when aircraft and pilot became a single entity focused on one purpose: bringing people home. "Flight time to target?" she asked. 3 hours, 40 minutes. Weather's good, but we'll be flying through some unfriendly airspace. Yemen's got Russian surface-to-air systems, and their operators have been getting better at their job. The radio crackled to life. "Ghost Runner, this is Control. Mission is go. Package location has been updated. She's moving toward a rally point approximately 15 kilometers north of her last known position. You'll have a 10-minute extraction window before enemy forces reach her location." 10 minutes. Evie had conducted hundreds of combat missions, but the margin for error never stopped being terrifyingly thin. 10 minutes to find one person in hostile territory, extract her safely, and disappear before enemy forces could respond with deadly force. "Copy Control. Ghost Runner is airborne." The Black Hawk lifted off into the darkness, its navigation lights dark and radar signature minimized by modifications that didn't appear in any official technical manual. Below, the lights of Guardian Base fell away, replaced by the vast emptiness of desert terrain that would gradually give way to the mountains and urban sprawl of Yemen. Evie settled into the rhythm of long-distance flight, her instruments glowing softly in the darkened cockpit while autopilot systems handled the routine navigation tasks. This was when her mind usually wandered to the larger questions: what she was doing, why she was doing it, and whether the price she paid in isolation and official non-existence was worth the lives she managed to save. Tonight, though, her thoughts focused on the woman she was flying to rescue. Mockingbird, another operative who'd chosen to exist in the shadows, gathering intelligence that would never earn public recognition while risking capture, torture, and death for a country that would officially deny her existence if she were caught. There was a kinship there, Evie realized. Both of them had chosen to serve in ways that required them to sacrifice official acknowledgement for practical effectiveness. Both had learned to navigate the spaces between policy and necessity, between what was authorized and what was required. The radio crackled again. Ghost Runner Control. Be advised, package has gone dark. Last communication was 40 minutes ago. Her handler believes she's still mobile, but we've lost positive contact. Finding one person in enemy territory was difficult enough when that person could communicate her location. Finding someone who'd gone dark in hostile urban terrain was like searching for a specific grain of sand in a desert storm. But that was why they called for Ghost Runner, because impossible missions were what dead pilots did best. 2 hours into the flight, Evie crossed into Yemeni airspace, flying low and fast through mountain valleys that provided natural concealment from radar systems. The Black Hawk's advanced navigation systems painted a three-dimensional picture of the terrain ahead, allowing her to thread between peaks and ridgelines with minimal altitude exposure. Santos monitored communications frequencies and threat detection systems from his position behind the pilot's seat, calling out potential hazards as they emerged from the electronic landscape. Contact bearing 270, looks like a patrol vehicle. No indication they've detected us. Evie banked slightly left, putting a ridgeline between her aircraft and the potential threat. Flying in hostile territory required constant vigilance and the kind of instinctive decision-making that came only from experience. Every choice, altitude, heading, airspeed, routing, could mean the difference between mission success and becoming another classified statistic. Approaching target area, she announced, beginning her descent toward the coordinates where Mockingbird was supposedly waiting. The urban sprawl of a Yemeni city spread out below them, a maze of buildings and narrow streets that would provide perfect concealment for friendly forces and deadly ambush sites for hostiles. Ghost Runner Control. Package has re-established communication. She's at the alternate rally point, coordinates following. Be advised, she reports enemy forces approximately 20 minutes from her location and closing. 20 minutes had just become the most important 20 minutes of at least 2 people's lives. Evie pushed the Black Hawk's engines to maximum sustainable power, racing against time and hostile forces converging on a CIA operative whose only hope of survival wore the call sign Ghost Runner. The aircraft screamed through the night sky, its pilot navigating by instruments and instinct through terrain that had claimed aircraft and crew members from a dozen different nations. This was what she lived for, not the recognition or the official acknowledgement, but these moments when skill and determination were the only things standing between innocence and tragedy. This was why she'd chosen to remain dead in the eyes of the military bureaucracy, while staying very much alive in the spaces where life and death decisions were measured in seconds rather than committee meetings. The alternate rally point appeared on her navigation display, a small clearing on the outskirts of the city, barely large enough for a helicopter landing, but isolated enough to provide some tactical concealment. Evie began her approach, scanning the area for signs of the CIA operative who was counting on Ghost Runner to materialize from the darkness like an angel of extraction. Through her night vision system, she spotted a figure crouched behind a low stone wall, signaling with an infrared strobe that would be invisible to anyone without the proper equipment. Mockingbird, right where she was supposed to be, displaying the kind of operational discipline that separated professionals from casualties. Package acquired, Evie reported, beginning extraction. The Black Hawk touched down in a cloud of dust and rotor wash, its engines screaming as Evie held the aircraft ready for immediate departure. The figure behind the wall sprinted toward the helicopter, a woman in local dress, moving with the kind of controlled urgency that spoke of extensive training in hostile environment operations. She dove through the aircraft's open door just as the first muzzle flashes appeared on the surrounding rooftops. Enemy forces had found them. "Go, go, go," Mockingbird shouted, and Evie needed no further encouragement. The Black Hawk leaped into the air as tracer fire began arcing across their former position, climbing rapidly into the relative safety of altitude and darkness. "Welcome aboard," Evie said once they'd cleared immediate danger. "I'm Ghost Runner, you can call me Evie." The CIA operative, who appeared to be in her early 30s with dark hair and the kind of calm composure that came from extensive field experience, smiled despite their circumstances. "Thank you. I'm Sarah. I mean, Mockingbird." She caught herself using what was probably her real name, though I suppose formal introductions are a bit absurd under the circumstances. Not absurd, just honest. We spend so much time hiding behind call signs and cover identities that sometimes we forget we're real people doing real work for real reasons. As they flew through the night toward friendly territory, Evie found herself thinking about identity and purpose, about the price of serving in shadows, and the value of human connection in a world that demanded operational security above personal relationships. Both women had chosen paths that required them to sacrifice normal lives for extraordinary service, but sitting in this cockpit, racing through enemy airspace, Evie realized they'd also found something that normal lives rarely provided: absolute clarity about what mattered and why. The remainder of the flight passed in relative calm, with Mockingbird providing intelligence updates while Evie navigated back to friendly territory. As they crossed into friendly airspace, both women seemed to relax slightly, though neither would be completely at ease until they were safely on the ground. "Can I ask you something?" Mockingbird said as Guardian Base appeared on the horizon. "Shoot. Are you really dead? I mean officially." Evie considered the question. "Officially, yes. Practically, obviously not. Bureaucratically, it's complicated." "And you're okay with that? Living in the margins, not existing officially?" It was a question Evie had been wrestling with for 18 months, and one that would become even more pressing when she reported to General Hawkins in a few hours. "I've learned that sometimes the most important work gets done by people who don't officially exist to do it." Mockingbird nodded thoughtfully. "I understand that, but don't you ever want to just be yourself? Not Mockingbird or Ghost Runner or whatever operational identity we're wearing today." "Every day," Evie admitted. "But then someone needs extraction from impossible circumstances, and I remember why I choose to be Ghost Runner instead of just Evie." As they approached Guardian Base, Evie realized that this conversation had crystallized something she'd been struggling to articulate about her unusual existence. She wasn't just a pilot who happened to be officially dead. She was someone who discovered that true service sometimes required stepping outside official channels and accepting the personal costs that came with that choice. The Black Hawk touched down on the familiar tarmac as the sun began to rise over the Afghan mountains. Another mission completed, another life saved, another entry that would never appear in official records but would ripple through the lives of everyone it touched. As Mockingbird gathered her gear and prepared to disappear back into whatever shadowy world had produced her, she turned back to Evie. "For what it's worth, I think the world needs more people like you. People who care more about doing what's right than what's authorized." After she'd gone, leaving Evie alone with Santos and the morning maintenance routine, those words echoed in the cockpit like a benediction. In a few hours, she would sit across from General Hawkins and choose between official resurrection and continued ghostly existence. But for now, she had the satisfaction of knowing that Sarah, Mockingbird, was alive and safe, and that whatever choice she made about her own future, this mission had been worth the risks. Some rewards were more valuable than official recognition. Some prices were worth paying for the knowledge that, when it mattered most, you'd done the right thing regardless of what the regulations said. Ghost Runner's final unauthorized mission was complete. Now it was time for Major Evangeline Cross to decide who she wanted to be. The second meeting with General Hawkins felt different from the first. Evie entered the briefing room to find only the general waiting, along with a pot of coffee and 2 cups, a small gesture that suggested this would be more conversation than interrogation. Major Cross, thank you for coming. Coffee. Thank you, ma'am. Evie accepted the cup gratefully, using the ritual of adding cream and sugar to buy herself a few extra moments to assess the situation. I understand you flew another mission last night. It wasn't a question, and Evie didn't treat it as one. Yes, ma'am. CIA extraction in Yemen. Asset retrieved safely. Without authorization. The authorization was a CIA operative who would have been captured, tortured, and probably executed if someone hadn't acted. Evie met the general's eyes. Sometimes authorization is a luxury we can't afford. General Hawkins sipped her coffee thoughtfully. Major, I've spent the last 24 hours reviewing your service record, both official and unofficial. Before your supposed death, you were considered one of our finest pilots. Disciplined, skilled, reliable. Since your resurrection, you've conducted at least 18 high-risk extractions, saved approximately 67 American lives, and gathered intelligence that has prevented 3 terrorist attacks on American soil. Evie remained silent, unsure where this was leading. You've also violated approximately 47 different military regulations, ignored direct orders from superior officers, conducted unauthorized operations in hostile territory, and created enough diplomatic incidents to keep the State Department busy for the next 6 months. Yes, ma'am. So here's my question, Major. How do we reconcile exceptional results with completely unacceptable methods? It was the question that had been hanging over Evie's entire existence since the crash in Syria. How could the military reward effectiveness while maintaining discipline? How could official channels accommodate someone who'd proven that sometimes the most important missions required stepping outside those channels? With respect, ma'am, I don't think you can. The military needs order, discipline, and clear chains of command. What I do requires